Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day today. Pray that you'll bless our time together, and pray that you will deal with any technology demons that we have here today that seem to be active. Just pray that everything will go smoothly. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, as you know, we're getting a little bit of a late start. We've had some issues, technology issues here. Even though we have new technology, one of the connectors went bad or something, and then my computer got confused. So, which confused me till I figured it out. So just a few things in way of reminder. These are some of the other places that we post our Bible teachings and the prophecy updates. Although I've not been really good about Remnant Truth Network and Rumble, but we'll get back on track there and uploading those. Some weeks I'm going to tell you that things I'm going to talk about are related to, are only going to be on Rumble. Because I've already gotten a couple notices from YouTube about inappropriate content. And I'm not, and frankly, I don't know what they were. I think that the artificial intelligence at Facebook or YouTube is not very intelligent. It's certainly not wise. In that, I just read a mainstream news story and they said, "Well, that's that's inappropriate content." I'm like, "It's the New York Times." So the one strike was removed. I appealed the other one when I was talking about the passports, and I'll talk a little bit about those today. You know, those passports that are related to something that shall not be mentioned. It's a ridiculous world. I sometimes think it's like there's a ministry of truth out there now that we have to comply with. So we're not capitulating. I want people to understand we're not capitulating, but we do Bible teachings. And we'd like to keep that content on YouTube because it has a much wider reach than some of the other alternative platforms. So we do try to protect those Bible teachings and keep them up there for people to reference. For example, like all of Pastor Steve's sermons are up there on YouTube. You just do Fellowship Bible Chapel, Steve Mitchell, and you can find, you can get a playlist of all of his sermons. We have been running them occasionally on Friday nights for the last couple months. I don't think we did it this week, but if you want to access that there, you can go there. You can even download them if you know how to download things from YouTube. It is possible with some tools, although there is a constant battle with YouTube in terms of there are people that make tools so you can download videos. YouTube wants you to subscribe and pay $12.99 a month. That's what they want you to do, so that if you go to YouTube and you see all these annoying ads that pop up. So now on our videos, there'll be ads. We do not monetize our channel, but part of YouTube's strategy is they want to make the free version so annoying that you will go and pay the $12.99 a month just to end dealing with the frustration. So before anybody writes to us, I want you to know is we do not monetize our channel. We do not select the ads that play on the channel. If you don't want the ads, you have to, Firefox may have some blockers that you can use, I don't know, but you may have to subscribe to YouTube and then you can download them. So there are download tools that you use, but all of those stopped working this week. And again, YouTube, I guess the billions that they make isn't quite enough, so they want to get you to sign up for the $12.99 a month free or premium account or whatever they call it. I don't know. So listen, I also did a conference, Last Days Bible Conference. Those, you can go to ldbc.ca, and there are links there for all of the conference videos. They ran on, I don't know, April 28 and 29 and May 5 and 6. Eric Barger, Mike Gendron, and Isaac Gabazon and myself, we each did 2 talks, and they were theirs the other day. My 2 talks were Deplatforming Humanity, the Great Revealing of the Great Setup. You can imagine what that is about, social credit scores and that type of thing. And then sort of an update on the Enneagram study I did a while back here, the very viral variants of the apostasy virus. So say that 6 times real fast. We talk each week about the convergence of events. I have to tell you that as I prepared this week, in fact, I told Pastor Charles just before I came out here that it's impossible. It's impossible to keep up. Everything is happening so fast and so many things happening on so many different levels in terms of what I think are, at least, if you listen to my talk on the deplatforming humanity, I sort of give you a grid that I look at things through. As we see things accelerate, we see things converge. We see the building blocks, the logistics of what needs to happen for some of these Bible prophecies to be fulfilled. We see them coming into place. And then also things that as we get closer, I think we will have a little bit better understanding. We know that there's a lot. I participate in a lot of forums on Bible prophecy, and I have to tell you that there's a joke in Jerusalem that if you have two Jews in a conversation, you have at least three opinions involved. And I think that carries over to Bible prophecy forums, that if you have 25 people involved, you'll have 80 different opinions because everybody's got an opinion on everything. And so my view on Bible prophecy is I think we have a pretty good idea how some things go, what some of the major markers are, but the drill down to the very, very specific things, I think we're not quite there yet. And the best evidence, the best proof of whose view on Bible prophecy is correct is when it actually happens. And then we can say, oh yeah, that's the way, I knew that's how it was going to work out. And as I've often joked, not to joke about Bible prophecy, but there is that passage in Revelation that talks about 30 minutes of silence in heaven. And that is so all Bible prophecy teachers can update their PowerPoints and charts to conform with what is actually taking place. So I think that sometimes, a little bit of humbleness is good. I've used this verse the last few weeks. I think it does set up. Paul talks about persecutions, afflictions, which came unto me at Antioch, at Iconium, at Lystra. What persecutions I endured, but out of all of them the Lord delivered me, and yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. That's 2 Timothy chapter 3, the end. But look at what it says at the beginning of 2 Timothy chapter 3. Verse 1, this know also that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, from such turn away. For of this sort are they which creep into houses and lead captive silly women laden with sins, led away with divers lusts, ever learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now that passage is prophetic. It talks about in the last days perilous times will come, troubling times. We've often referred to 2 Peter chapter 2 where it talks about Lot. Jesus said it would be as it was in the days of Lot. And one of the things we know about Lot is Lot was vexed by what he saw going on. I think that this is a time when we are going to be a bit vexed about the way things are going. So today I've titled this, A World Without Guardrails. And as I look around, the only thing I could think of was a personal experience that Pam and I had. We were on our way back to Pennsylvania for a holiday to see my parents. They lived in Lancaster, PA at the time. And as we were driving across 70 over by Wheeling, we saw a billboard for this Hare Krishna temple. That's not, it's in West Virginia, things are never just off the highway. So we decided to go down. Now, one of the reasons I did was I have no desire to go to this temple or anything. I just wanted to see it because I used to be confronted. I used to go to New York quite a bit. Goodness, this is about 40 years ago when Pam and I were 12. We were a very young married couple. Actually, she was 8, I think, at the time. But I used to run into these guys at the airport in downtown New York all the time. So I thought, well, let's just go down and see what this place is. And you go down there, there's a commune and everything. But the interesting thing on the road, by the way, we got there and the place was incredibly, listen, it's demonic. It's a temple of demons. We did not go inside. The feeling of the whole area was spiritually oppressive as to what was going on. So they have this temple there that they've built, they've raised money for, and it's Panaraba Bibi's, whatever his name is, this palace of gold. And they have a commune there, they had a big building, a lot of heavy earth-moving equipment. They had gold leaf over most of the outside of the temple. And just these it was demonic what was going on there. And they've actually had by the way, a lot of trouble in that community with allegations and proved allegations of child abuse, sexual abuse, and whatnot. It's not a happy place. But on the road there, the one thing I noticed was, this was West Virginia. First of all, the road was very steep. There were drop-offs, usually on one or both sides, and there were no guardrails. And even though the road was very curvy, you could see maybe 25, 30, 40 yards ahead, the entire road had a dotted yellow line in the middle, which sort of means around here that you can pass. But the thing was, it was a place without guardrails. I posted on my Facebook page, another time we went on a trip, we went to, took a Jeep trip from Ouray, Colorado to Telluride. One of the greatest trips we've ever taken, and one which Pam has assured me will never be repeated in her lifetime. It was a Jeep trip over a mountain trail. I wouldn't call it a road. And there were places where, right outside, in fact, you maybe get ahead and walk ahead of the Suburban, this big Suburban that we were in, and tell them how close he was to the edge, because they have what they call 5-point turns. In order to make the turn around the corner as you're going down the switchbacks, you have to pull up and back up 5 times. That's why they call it a 5-point turn. And he wanted to, make sure, so he would have me tell me how close am I to the edge of going over. And I'm looking down, and it's 500 feet down to the next switchback. And there are no guardrails. In fact, and I saw a video once where somebody was on the road and they were driving along, and all of a sudden, here comes a Jeep tumbling down the Black Bear Pass Road, being destroyed right in front of them because the guardrails did not hold them. And this is, I think, a good picture of the way the world is. That's a long way of saying it, but it is what's going on. We know that God will eventually, He'll remove the brakes on humanity. Whatever guardrails there were will be gone. And humanity is going to go 1,000 miles an hour right over the edge. But we in the church, we need to be rooted in our scripture and doctrine and that type of thing to keep within the guardrails and parameters that God has set for us. Not to be legalistic or anything about it, but there are guidelines that we need to follow. So let's look at some of the news events this week. There is no way that I'm getting through this. But let's go. So I'll try to talk as understandably fast as I possibly can. Here was this job report, and this is sort of an example of the way everything goes now, and is particularly in American culture. You may not have noticed this, but there's a pretty big divide between political conservatives and everybody else. There doesn't seem to be a lot of agreement. So this is an example. So Biden administration, we're going to add 1 million jobs, and it was about 266,000. It was about 25% of what they said. Now, a lot of conservatives came out and said, well, what do you expect? And you talk to restaurant owners. I see interview after interview after interview with restaurant owners, and they say, I can't find people to work in my restaurant because they're making so much on unemployment that they don't want to come back to work. So the Minister of Truth, Jim Psaki, was asked these questions at a news conference this week, and she said, now, you know, there's a debate over, I don't know that enhanced benefits have anything to do with it. These people are blind. People are blind. I mean, don't you understand? If you could make $50,000 a year sitting in your basement, perusing social media, why would you go down to a restaurant and make $35,000 or whatever the number is? It's just plain common sense, but we live in a world where there's no common sense because the guardrails have been removed. Common sense used to guide people. And Daniel talks about knowledge being increased, and one interpretation of that is, and I think it's one of the interpretations that's acceptable, is that in the end there will be a lot of knowledge. But it's interesting, Daniel says there'll only be a few that'll be wise and understand what's going on. So I see a lot of information, a lot of data. Facebook has tons of information on us. Go listen to my talk. Go listen to Eric Barger's talk on the surveillance society at last day's Bible conference. There are plenty of data out there, but there's not a lot of wisdom. A lot of information, but wise people are few and far between. Now, this is something that these are sort of these repeated attacks that happen, these cyber attacks. And here's one that happened to the Colonial Pipeline. It is one of the largest pipelines in the United States. It's very, very important. It is essentially the gasoline and fuel supply for the East Coast. It is now, at least as of, it's been shut down for about 48 hours. Jet fuel and that type of thing comes through that pipeline. Things when they're going through that pipeline move at about 3 to 5 miles per hour. But if you have to completely replace the pipeline by all of the trucks, getting trucks to move this fuel, first of all, you got to have the trucks, right? Then you got to get them to the place where at the refineries down in Houston to move everything. And what I'm reading is if they can't get this, it was a cyber attack based on ransomware. Don't know exactly where it came from. There's speculation of certain countries have done this. I'm sure that information will come out, but I'm reading that if they need to move all that stuff by truck, it could take 30 to 40 days if they can find the trucks to get everything in place. And guess what? I'm reading all kinds of reports that there is a shortage of truck drivers. Folks, I get criticized a lot about, you're just all bad news. I want to tell you the truth. I could get up here and tell you everything is great. I could tell you it's not raining outside. It's raining outside. It's pouring. And in terms of these troubling times, in the last days, perilous times will come. That is a prophecy. I want to be glad and happy, but go to Joel Osteen. He'll get you that if he's meeting. Are they even meeting down there? I mean, there are some good things that came about as a result of this, all these shutdowns. By the way, I don't have a video on it. Another pastor in Calgary, Canada, the Polish Canadian pastor was arrested yesterday. You can find the videos any number of places. I think I saw it at Moriel B. Alert Facebook page. They brought a SWAT team to arrest a pastor and his assistant. I mean, it looked like a takedown on SWAT, about the LA SWAT team, that's a CBS program, for a pastor because he had church in violation of the rules. These things are done to send a message. Don't any of you other people who are thinking about it get out of line, because we'll do the same thing to you. And you can come deal with the ministry of truth like all these other people have done. Now, this I'm going to go through fairly quickly. So Warren Buffett is one of the wealthiest people on the planet. I think his net worth is somewhere between 90 and $100 billion. Berkshire Hathaway, I don't know what the share price of a share of Berkshire Hathaway. They've never split the stock, so it's into six figures just to buy one share. But his returns are down. But what's happening? The stakeholders, this is a new term, in Berkshire Hathaway are coming and pressing him on social issues. Here, you see the highlighted paragraph. The shareholder movement to press companies on climate change, social progress, and governance continues to gain steam in the U.S., emerging as a key selling point for money managers in their efforts to keep client money. It's called ESG, environmental, societal, and governance. It used to be corporations did things to maximize value for their shareholders who actually own the company. Now it's stakeholders who think they have a say in things, and this is Marxism being pushed into companies. Critical race theory, tearing down human standards, removing the guardrails, and they're trying to get all of these companies to go along with it, and they're pressuring them. This is what led Major League Baseball to move the baseball all-star game out of Georgia to a state where the voting restrictions are stricter than they are in Georgia. And the people, this is insane. I mean, if I just look at it from a Republican-Democrat divide, and I know that, I can't count all the Republicans as true conservatives. There's plenty of rhinos in that group. But the Senate is 50-50. The majority in the House for the Democrats is a historical low. And they act like there's no opposition. Or if there is opposition, they're going to crush you. The speed with which this has changed has been shocking to a lot of people. This is an old story from the UK that we've talked about a little bit. Trans ruling was Orwellian, the tribunal hears. This was a lady who had mentioned she just doesn't believe in this transgender nonsense. She doesn't accept it. She thinks there's men and women. And you're born a man, and your DNA will always be a male DNA. That's a scientific fact. That the DNA has not changed. I want to be clear how I say this. When I see these people who struggle with this, I have compassion for them. But I also know that children and others need to be protected from this. And what they're doing is they're removing the guardrails so that they're sexually mutilating children, either with pharmaceuticals or surgery. There's an article in the New York Times this morning about the guy from Pennsylvania who was appointed to the Department of Health and Human Services as an undersecretary, and how, we're just trying to improve society. We're just trying to make it where we've got this beautiful light ahead of us, so we're going to make this great society for everybody if you guys just all go along. So anyway, the court and the papers filed in court in the UK on this hearing, she was fired from her job because she spoke out on social media. She's I think a PhD. Worked at a successful company, and she's out of work because she spoke the truth. And the tribunal was told, listen, this is Orwellian stuff that we're dealing with here. And they're right. This is back, this is a thing I wanted to put in with that article on the infrastructure attacks. This was from one of the papers this morning. Attacks on critical infrastructure have been a major concern for a decade, but they have accelerated in recent months after two breaches: the SolarWinds intrusion by Russia's main intelligence service, and another against some types of Microsoft design systems that has been attributed to Chinese hackers, underscored the vulnerability of the networks on which the government and corporations rely. There are already supply chain problems. I saw that the price of an average home is now up $36,000 to build because of the increase in the price of lumber. The price of steel has tripled. Chips. It's hard to get chips. I mean, if you're thinking about buying something, you probably ought to do it now that has certain chips in it before the supply runs out. It's crazy. So back to this ESG thing, though, that is affecting Berkshire Hathaway and others. It's even here is the Human Rights Project, and they have a new brochure out, a new publication, Corporate Equality Index for 2021. And do you think that has anything to do with it's not really equality? And they go through and they rank all the companies that are, do they go along with the transgender movement? Who are the best companies? And all the Silicon Valley companies score 100 on this pretty much. One of them, though, I think Berkshire Hathaway, you can see how it's kind of grayed out about 4 down. It doesn't get very good scores. So why now? Does that explain why activists are targeting Berkshire Hathaway? Got to get those people in line. Got to make them do what we want to do. They looked at things like benefits, transgender inclusive health benefits. And they're pushing this in the military because this is very expensive surgery. So it costs a couple $100,000, I'm told. That's why they're pushing it as a benefit in the military, and now the military cannot exclude people that are struggling with this. We get the government to pay for it. What you need, just worry, we'll be printing another $2 trillion. Just give us a few days. Because no sooner do they pass one of these giant stimulus packages here in the U.S., then there's another one in the pipeline being introduced. It's insane. I fear it's going to cause massive inflation. Prices are already going up. There's a shortage of chicken now. I went to buy a chicken at Costco. I had to wait in line till they pulled it off the thing because they were out twice when I went around there. It takes 72 minutes, by the way, to cook a chicken at Costco. So just so you know. But don't rest assured, if you're there 78 minutes later, they may all be gone again already, which was what happened to me. I went someplace else and came back 80 minutes later, and they were gone. And the prices are going up. I fear that soon you're going to go out and say, honey, could you get the Chateaubriand for your meal tonight instead of the chicken breast? Because we can't afford the chicken breast. We can afford the Chateaubriand, Anyway, so here we say 22 times as many businesses have transgender inclusive health benefits than they did 12 years ago. 22 times. Do you think that things like the Human Rights Project have had an impact? Is anything related to the church 22 times more likely? Well, acceptance of false teaching might be 22 times more likely, but in terms of good things for the church, no, it's going the other. Do you see how it's going the other way? There's a pile of information that indicate otherwise. Here we go. There's Berkshire Hathaway. Their score is only 20, but Apple, Walmart, United Health, AT&T, Walgreens, JP Morgan, they're all hundreds. Now, there was this hearing in front of Congress, This is a congresswoman. What is her last name? Carrie Bush. She's leftist. But she talked about how her son got sick and needed help and all this stuff. And she concluded her remarks before a congressional hearing. I'm going to play you the clip of what she said. Listen to what she says near the end. You'll also be able to see it in the subtitles.
This is what desperation looks like, that chair flying down a hallway. This is what being your own advocate looks like. Every day, Black women are subjected to harsh and racist treatment during pregnancy and childbirth. Every day, Black women die because the system denies our humanity. It denies us patient care. I sit before you today as a single mom, as a nurse, as an activist, and as a congresswoman, and I am committed to doing the absolute most to protect Black mothers, to protect Black babies, to protect Black birthing people, and to save lives. Thank you, and I yield back.
Birthing people? This is where we are. Birthing people. Those would be females. Listen, her story may be actually accurate, that people didn't pay attention to her and she had to advocate for her son, and help us in the healthcare system to everybody, Congresswoman Bush. It does. And it shouldn't happen. But birthing people? Here's a little thing from, comes from Eric Swalwell, which is a left-wing congressman. 85% of Americans who watched Joe Biden's address to a joint session of Congress approved of his speech. 78% made it feel more optimistic about America. I think he wants Jen Psaki's Ministry of Truth job. Here's another one of these appointments. This is to the Pentagon. This guy is, he's appointed to a top-level policy position in the Pentagon to enforce and root out extremism. He is a radical. He's tweeted in support of Antifa, Black Lives Matter, all of these other things. And he's going to get appointed to this job at the Pentagon, probably, to enforce these things like what Secretary of Defense Austin put about a stand-down order so we can root out extremism. Because what are they doing? They're purging the military. What else are they doing? They're making it so bad for policemen, good people. Yeah, listen, known fact, there are bad cops. Known fact, there are a lot of good ones too. But what they're doing with this to fund the police and prosecutors not prosecuting people who are arrested. Policemen are resigning in droves, hundreds in Baltimore, New York, Chicago. Why? They're purging it. They're bottoming out all of the conservative law and order types. And they're either going to do away with local police and have a federal police force, or they're going to redo the local police forces. I'm just telling you, this is what's going on. And when you talk about it, it's obvious. But you get the Eric Swalwells of the world, and they'll say, no, John, you don't know what's going on. We're building a better society. Okay, you believe that. You're free to believe whatever you want. You're free to be wrong. Disney has come out with this critical race theory instruction for its employees. I'll share more with this. I'm going to have to do a midweek thing. I know I have always threatened to do it, and I never do it. There's just so much going on. I'm going to have to do a midweek thing here sometime because I'm not getting through this very quickly today. But this is a page from the Disney instruction manual. It's about 24 pages. You can download the PDF. And you hear what it says. Looking forward, they want equity, not equality. And they have this little graphic here, equality on the left everybody gets to go to the stadium, but not everybody can see because some might be shorter than others. And then on the right, they have what equity is. And this is what they say. We really need to be striving for equity where we focus on the equality of the outcome, not the equality of the experience by taking individual needs and skills into account. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like something straight out of the Marxist playbook. This is a college in Ontario. How a unicorn is helping Ontario's public and Catholic schools welcome gender diversity. This is for children, as young as kindergarten. Now, when I was in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, my biggest concern in life was hitting a baseball or making a basket with a basketball. We are destroying the young people. And I see article after article. Read Christopher Russo, go to City Journal, Christopher Rufo, others, Barry Weiss, are writing about this, how they're just, these private schools, people are pulling their kids out because they're destroying their kids with this stuff. Look at some of these pages. Here is, hi, I'm Gigi. How to advocate at school for yourself or someone you love. Let's go. And they have this whole thing, the Gigi Project. The goal of Gigi is to equip all of Ontario's students and teachers, whether transgender or cisgender, with the tools to advocate for the right to express and live their gender in their own way without experiencing discrimination. I saw somebody interviewing people on a campus recently. How many genders do you think there are? You know what the one guy said? Infinity. Whatever anybody wants to refer to themselves as. I happen to be a cisgender male, but I don't want to judge anyone else. And so they have these people, and so they're shoving this stuff into all the schools. You just need to do it. Here's the thing, gender identity. Sparkly and serious. Look at how they break this down. Your gender identity is a core sense of you are, is that deep down feeling that helps you recognize what does and does not feel right gender-wise, no matter what other people expect from you. You can have a gender identity of girl, woman, boy, man, non-binary, or anyone else, anywhere else along the gender spectrum. Now, I got a question is, why do you limit it? You cisgender, transgender activists, why do you limit it to gender identity? Everybody has a gender, why? Maybe they don't want a gender identity. How dare you shove your views on somebody else? That would be, and then there's a whole section there for lawyers. So last week I reported to you about the Carrollton Independent School District in Southlake, Texas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that they were having a school board election, and then they were pushing all this critical race theory stuff on everybody. They had all these PowerPoints. I mean, you can download all this stuff. I mean, everything is available now. They don't hide it. It just takes you just do a good DuckDuckGo or Google search and you got the documents, the PowerPoints. But Southlake, they had an election and a couple people came out and said, we aren't supporting this. They won with 70 to 80% of the vote, re-election to the school board. Others who supported it got roundly defeated. So there is some good news. But this is the type of thing that comes into this. This is from the Education Post, and this is one of the articles by, I can't remember this guy's name. And he says, the title of the article, because he supports this critical race theory stuff, and he says, no, you should not be teaching black children if you reject anti-racism. If you disagree with us, you are disqualified from being a teacher. If you claim to be colorblind, we need anti-racist white teachers, the article says, co-strategists and laborers in this work who are open to being deeply self-reflective about how to be the most effective at teaching black and brown children. Teachers are not fit to teach black and brown children if they fail to understand that color blindness is erasure. And this is how he describes it. The revolution of liberating education begins in our classrooms with empathy along with the truth about how this country was founded and how inequity has been maintained and protected for generations. Do you see how this is all connected together? And this is pushing the 1619 Project, which the Biden administration is pushing to fund through their, well, I'm going to call it the Miseducation Department, or the Department of Miseducation. This is where we're going. Now, let's go to the things that cannot be mentioned. This is an article from the Arab News. It says, quote, mandatory jabs for office goers will make workplaces safer. Here's a CNBC article about what's being rolled out in terms of these passports. So I'm just telling you what's happening with passports. Okay, this is what's happening.
Lines, including United, are rolling out apps so passengers easily can document they've had their shots. Brown, Cornell, and Rutgers universities intend to require students to be vaccinated to return to campus. And to basketball, the Miami Heat plan to offer vaccinated-only seating sections.
I think we're going to be very willing to present ourselves in a health security way than we imagine today.
Health passports may play a big role in Las Vegas, where crowds are crucial to the economy, in casinos and conventions, sports or entertainment.
The ones who fly high.
Like Cirque du Soleil. The company's chairman is Jim Murren.
It's just, in my mind, analogous to 9/11, when post that tragedy, we had to change the way we checked into airports and got onto planes. I think the same thing happens here with live entertainment and conventions.
And Clear, best known for airport security, is now also processing for health. To many, though, this is a vast intrusion of privacy. Lawmakers like Kentucky Senator Rand Paul are sounding the alarm. He calls it a power grab, which would determine your social suitability to engage in your everyday life. Governors of Texas, Florida, Arizona, and Idaho have banned government from requiring it. Montana's governor even forbade private business. The White House says it will be left to private industry.
There will be no centralized universal federal vaccinations database and no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential.
But vaccine passports are already coming into play on the job. Mercer's global survey shows 27% of employers are using some kind of third-party app to track their workers' vaccination status, and another third are considering it.
Because that would get them up to 60%. That's right now. So the government doesn't need to do it. They've outsourced it. And what's the rule? Who knows what the rule is? That's the problem. And so Rand Paul, Naomi Wolf, and others are sounding the alarm, and I'm concerned about it too. This is, as Naomi Wolf said, this is the Chinese social credit system brought to America, and it's already there and in place. There's even, I should have put a slide up about it, JP Morgan Chase has an app now where you can determine your carbon footprint. Because you know what's going to happen. You know that little credit score you have that you work so hard to build up? If you're using too much carbon, your credit score is going to go down. And they don't want to do business with those type of people. Confession, I went through and I gave sort of extreme answers to one of these things, although I drive a hybrid. And I love it when it gets 65 miles to the gallon. I think that's a great day. But at the end of the app, it said, do you want to know what your status, your carbon status is? Whether you're a good citizen? I was a carbon villain. I, John, am a carbon villain. And I don't care. There's a new book out. I heard the guy on Dennis Prager the other day. He worked in the climate change part of the first Obama administration, first or second. And he comes out and he says, go get his book. So I don't get a strike. What do you think he says about climate change and all this other stuff? This is one where you can use that term that nobody likes to use, fake news. We're being lied to all the time. I feel like the magazine should be called New York Pravda, Chicago Pravda, that type of thing. The Ministry of Truth. And it's shocking that in a country that you thought valued free speech and debate and open discussion and stuff like that, that it's changed that quickly. It has. There's just no other way around it. So if you're watching this, share it quickly before it gets banned. Trump, they upheld his Facebook ban. Even in the UK and the Times of London, they said this is pretty bad. So one more thing before we move to the Middle East. I mentioned this last Sunday. I'm going to play the video. Paula White, who was one of Trump's advisors, went and spoke at this Unification Church Rally of Hope with the widow of Sun Myung Moon, a virtual conference. And they did another one here recently, the 5th Rally of Hope. And here's the introduction for a politician that you might be aware of.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome His Excellency Vice President Mike Pence.
Distinguished leaders, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to address you at this global rally of hope, sponsored by the Universal Peace Federation, and join you in the great cause of building a more peaceful and prosperous world. The Bible says, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and I believe this gathering of leaders from nations across the world, leaders who cherish the values of faith, family, democracy, and justice under the rule of law will be a blessing to people in Korea, the Indo-Pacific, and the wider world. And I'm also grateful to the Washington Times, a model of fair and accurate reporting that American decision makers have relied on for nearly 40 years. I especially want to thank Dr. Moon for hosting this important event and for faithfully devoting her life to the pursuit of peace.
Well, it goes on. I mean, did you see that introduction where they had everybody in the virtual big curved screen? I mean, stuff is very creepy. So listen, this, there are a lot of people working against biblical values. That should be apparent. I'm telling you folks, the guardrails are down. And you have to protect yourself and your family. So eventually, I think all these people are working together for the wrong thing. We know that. There's some hope, but there's troubling hope. I'm going to share that at the end. This is a little bit about Jordan. The king has come out and said, listen, we got everybody. It was a painful thing that happened. My half-brother, and other people tried to take me down, and we've now reconciled, and everything is better. There are reports that from one of the people in the Jordan Senate came out and said that one of the people that was behind this was Jared Kushner. Now, I don't know if he's just saying that to deflect blame or what, or to propagandize away. I have no way of knowing. And there was also reports that Mohammed bin Salman was also involved with this. So now my next series of slides are going to be mostly about the Middle East, and try as I might, they're going to be a bit jumbled up because everything is very interconnected. I want you to understand that. What you're seeing is all of these streams of all these players in Bible prophecy stuff, they're all converging and moving all at the same time. Some at more rapid speeds than others, but all of them seem to be coming together at a very rapid clip. This is to sort of set up the historical thing. You know, Mark Twain went to Israel back in the 1860s. And very famous. You can find the quotes from his, Pilgrims Abroad or something like that. I can't remember the exact title. You can find the book online very easily. And he said they'd go through Israel, and it was like very depressing because there was like nothing green, there was nothing alive, and we would go a long way and never see a person. Now, I assure you, if you go to Israel today, that's not going to be your experience. The land has really changed. In fact, I think it's today is Jerusalem, Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day, where they celebrate the reunification of the city of Jerusalem. It differs on it happened in June of 1967, but because of the way the Israeli calendar works, the Hebrew calendar works, it's based on lunar, so it's going to shift from year to year. You always have to look it up. So if you think you're going to go on May 14th and celebrate Independence Day, it's not going to happen most years. It's going to be rare. It's going to be some other day. So Yom Yerushalayim Day, we were there in May 2017, and it was the 50th anniversary of Jerusalem Day. An incredible time to be in Jerusalem. They said there are more people in Jerusalem when we were there than had ever been in Jerusalem at any one time in its history. It was incredible. But the interesting thing about the calendar is that it's coinciding this year with the end of Ramadan. That's a bit of a toxic mess. So there were orders issued that the Temple Mount would be closed to Jews for the foreseeable future, to non-Muslims for the foreseeable future. But the point of this is, look, these are pictures taken in different towns, and there were no mosques back in those days. There were Jewish worshipers in Israel. So all of this other stuff is a big fat myth that's made up. It's done for political purposes. So let's just look at some of the things that are going on. I have some more comments about it. 3-week target for new Iran nuclear deal. Iran expects U.S. will lift sanctions on oil and banks. I was reading a commentator on this weekend. I think it was Harold Rode. He works with the Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney's group. He was interviewed, and he said, if this is what they want to do, they do not understand how Iranians negotiate. They have lost. They will be viewed as weak, and they won't change or improve anything. It is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. This is what we have with the new administration and the people they've put in place, some of whom really don't like Israel. Secretary of State Blinken, he's not mentioned anything about the Abraham Accords. The word has not passed his lips in, what is it now, almost 4 months in office. Turkey's asserting itself. It's trying to realign itself. They're not getting their F-35, so now they're saying everything at Incirlik Air Base, which is pretty important to the U.S., in terms of its Middle East operations and where there are supposedly some nuclear warheads, everything belongs to us. Here's the reports from from some of the Turkish press. Now, President Biden, I will give him credit. Well, whoever made the decision to have him read the words about the Armenian genocide back in the 1910s. It is it needed to be recognized. Turkey is madder than mad. That's why they're doing things like saying Incirlik Air Base belongs to us, you Americans, get out. There was a General Harbord. This was a guy who went through the Middle East back around World War I. And this is a Turkish slanted article saying, well, he went these places and he just didn't see that anything like an Armenian genocide had happened. You can find pictures online of the people being crucified. It's troubling. This is what the Federalists put up. Biden issues Indian travel ban a year after calling Trump's China travel ban xenophobic. I'll just leave that one sort of hanging out there. Here is an article from I think this is Jerusalem Post. Biden threatens to greenlight third intifada if Israel opposes a future Iranian nuclear deal. Over strong Israeli opposition and despite Iranian promises to destroy the Jewish state, U.S. President Joe Biden is moving quickly to restore Barack Obama's Iran nuclear deal, paving the way for Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. At the same time, there has been a decided uptick in the number and severity of Palestinian and Iranian attacks against Israel. My sources inside the U.S. government suggest one factor behind this may be tacit Biden permission or support for increased violence from Gaza or a new intifada if Israel refuses to accede quietly to a new Iranian deal or takes unapproved steps to defend itself against the Iranian threat. Unapproved steps. I feel like I'm watching a version of the Godfather movie without the music. This would be a catastrophic mistake and horrific breach of trust built on the facts if the idea of the Biden government would preserve the Israeli government by greenlighting the Iranian or Palestinian terror attacks against innocent Israelis. It cannot be lightly dismissed. This was an article, I can't remember the date that this was in this was in the last week in the Jerusalem Post. As the margins grow wider, the flames of conflict grow hotter. There's a big divide in Israeli society, and the ultra-Orthodox are not very popular. There are a lot of concerns about them. So let's move on. There's so much going on in the Middle East and in Central Asia. This is a hypersonic missile test by Russia in the Black Sea in view of our forces. These are missiles that we don't really have a very good defense system for at the time. Tehran Times, I think you just go look it up online. You can read it each day if you want the Iranian propaganda part. Now, one thing that they do tell the truth in those things sometimes, like here is Pentagon chief, next major war will be much different. He's talking about using artificial intelligence. That's concerning. So sometimes this is how Iran negotiates. Whether the U.S. has agreed to this or not, it says that Washington is going to pay $7 billion in exchange for 4 spies. So they put that out there in the news. And you'll see Turkey does the same thing when they're negotiating about Eastern Mediterranean gas rights. They'll say, we in Israel have agreed to a corridor between Turkey and Israel. They haven't agreed to that. But they put out these beautiful graphics. It's all propaganda. And it's to shore up leaders who need to be shored up. But this is an article, Foreign Policy, Biden's, which is hardly a right-wing rag. It says, Biden's $90 billion bailout to Tehran. I mean, we're printing money. Why don't we just give Tehran some money? This is reported also in the New York Times. So here you see, and now here's some things that are going on. This is Iran. This is one of their mouthpieces. And here's the headline: Intifada readier than ever to uproot the occupiers. So what you saw over the last week was, you saw this concerted, unified effort among Iran and its proxies to stir up things in Israel. And it's worked to some extent. This is from the Arab News. I think it's a good analogy or a good graphic of what's going on. Iran's pouring fuel on the fire in the Middle East, and they're trying to get things very disrupted. There was also some good articles that talked about the growing rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They're sort of trying to put the pieces together. I played this clip last week. This is Mohammed bin Salman. He talks about, listen, we don't agree 100% on everybody. There's more marginal difference. This is normal. Even in the same house, you cannot find brothers in 100% agreement on everything. He probably knows that from personal experience. And so, listen, the Biden administration, we agree on a lot of things. But listen, they're reaching out to Iran. They're having meetings. They have been having meetings ever since the Biden administration took over. It's even led to the Israeli National Institute for National Strategic Studies, INSS at Tel Aviv University, has a very good article out, Saudi Arabian Dialogue Toward a Strategic Change. This was just published this week. The meetings reported in recent weeks between Iran and Saudi Arabia are a new development in the relations between the two countries, which were severed in 2016. The immediate context is the change of administration in the United States. The Biden administration has begun a dialogue with Tehran about a return to the nuclear agreement and has also severely criticized Saudi Arabia. The changed stance in the White House has led to adjustments in Saudi foreign policy, including a reconciliation with Qatar in January 2021, the offer of a ceasefire agreement to the Houthis in Yemen in March, and most recently, the beginning of a dialogue with Iran. So this is what's going on. This is what's being pushed. But beginning earlier this week and continuing through the week, I tried to organize this chronologically, but I think some of them are a little bit out of order. There was a concerted effort by Iran and its proxies to stoke up things in the Middle East. So here is a tweet. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei on Friday called Israel not a country, but a terrorist base, and said its downfall was imminent. In the National from the United Arab Emirates, there were reports about satellite images revealing new Iranian missile silos. You can go to the National in the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and read that. This is a very good, because all these missile bases are underground, but you see the things above ground, and you can kind of tell what's going underneath. And this is, I think, the satellite is kind of unzipping what's going on there. There are people who may be charged with crimes in Israel for giving money from European aid donors to Palestinian terrorists. I think some people have already been indicted. Now, there was an attack that took place a couple days ago, I think Friday, at a previously undisclosed Israeli base in Samaria, near the town of Jenin, I believe. It's near a junction. And what happened was that there was a bus of, and I'll use the term Palestinians just so everybody knows what I'm talking about. There was a bus of Palestinians who were on their way to Friday prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Now, as a general rule, those buses are given pretty free passage to do that, because Israel doesn't want to stir things up. But as it approached the entrance to this base, the Israeli military stopped the bus. They stopped the bus probably because they had a pretty good idea that there were some things on that bus that weren't quite right. They made the passengers disembark, and there were 3 young Palestinian males that got off, and they had automatic weapons and other things. And an Israeli female soldier, the report is, shot 2 of them dead and 1 was critically injured. Because they were on their way to Jerusalem to cause some problems. Well, I thought it was just a religion of peace on Ramadan. The end of Ramadan, representing when Muhammad got the Holy Quran. That has some pretty bad things in it about Jewish people. And the Hadith's even worse. So 2 of the Palestinians were killed. There was another attack about a week ago, and the common thing is for Israel to go in and destroy the home of the terrorists. The family home is destroyed. This has to do a little bit with tribal Middle Eastern culture, that you have to really humiliate somebody to get them to change. That's just the way it is. It sounds very cruel to us, but this is the way they've found effective, is just to go in and destroy these homes. Now I'm going to show you a video of this terrorist family home. I want you to be prepared, because you understand that in Judea and Samaria, these Palestinians are upset because they live in such incredible abject poverty, right? Now, I've been in that area of Judea and Samaria, and I can tell you that there was in some areas it's horrible. It's incredibly bad. But there are other areas in Judea and Samaria that kind of remind you of Beverly Hills or upscale suburbs in Orange County. So just be prepared for the abject horror of what you're going to see about this Palestinian terrorist home. It's pretty bad. Here's a little video of their coming into it. They're mapping it because they're getting ready to demolish it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is what groups like Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem and others that talk about apartheid and all this stuff going on, is they lie to you. It's all propaganda. It's awful. And I think Pam will verify this. We were up on top of Mount Gerizim, and Joel Kramer, our guide, said, "Look over there. That's the biggest home in the West Bank." And this thing is a villa. I mean, you can see it from a mile away. It's huge. I've seen the inside of this thing. It's enormous. Now, my question is, what does the guy, what business is the guy in that he can afford to build a house like that? My speculation was that he sold security fencing to Israel, because there's security fencing everywhere, but apparently he's in some other kind of businesses. But it's an incredibly huge home. It's one of the biggest homes I've ever seen. So this myth, it's a myth. So there's just this push. Abbas has said we're not going to allow Palestinian votes until they agree to a vote in East Jerusalem. And now there's like this East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. There was Jerusalem. There was always a Jerusalem. Now it's East and West Jerusalem. The other thing, too, is Naftali Bennett may hold the key to who's going to be the next prime minister in Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu returned his mandate this week. He could not form a coalition. I think he got up to like 57 to 59. He needed 61. Now Bennett's meeting with a left-wing party. I'm open to learning about this. I would suggest, highly recommend. I did not have time to edit it. Caroline Glick each week go to carolineglick.com, and she's doing a hour-long update, if you will, each week about what's going on in Israel and the Middle East. And she ran in Bennett's party for the Knesset in one of the more recent elections. I think it was 2 elections ago. They've had 4, I don't know if it was the second or third. They didn't get enough votes for her to get down to where she was on the list. But she has some pretty harsh comments about Naftali Bennett. I think you need to go listen to it, carolineglick.com. It's episode 4 as to what's going on. Well, Jared Kushner is back. He has now established the Institute, the Abraham Accords Institute for Peace. And a lot of people that were involved in helping negotiate that are members of that institute. So he's still involved. He has not gone away. So now I'm going to get to what happened this week with Iran and its proxies. So on Tuesday or Wednesday, the 5th, the head of the Iran Revolutionary Guard, Salami, came out with some pretty severe comments about Israel. Israel could be blown up in a single operation, he said. Known for his harsh anti-Israeli rhetoric, Salami downplayed the Jewish state's defenses as a security bulb that has been burst following a series of recent incidents. So what this guy did, this is Iranian propaganda, okay? I do not believe a word he says other than the fact that certain things happen. So there was a fire explosion at a missile factory in Haifa. We did that. You remember the errant air defense missile that landed near Dimona? It wasn't right next to Dimona. It was a few kilometers away. If they were aiming for it, they've got very bad aim. But he said, we did that. And so he's taking credit for all of these things when I don't believe that he did these. It's just pure propaganda because they have elections coming up in Iran and they're trying to get people riled up to vote. Although I think the outcome is pretty much determined. And we have the people in the Biden administration running around saying, hey, we got moderate Rouhani. Rouhani is not a moderate, for crying out loud. Stop saying this nonsense. But when you have a new department called the Ministry of Truth, even though it's not there's not a Secretary of Truth yet, but there effectively is one in the Biden administration, this is the type of propaganda you're going to get. This is kind of an interesting graphic that came from Ayatollah Khamenei's page, showing that Israel's afraid of us, they're digging their own graves, and we're going to rain missiles down on them and kill them in one operation. And so Salami did this interview, and he goes, listen, simple calculation, Americans are the most unique empire in human history. Diminishing that power, eroding it, making it void, depleting it from within, and forcing it to disintegrate along wide fronts. So in other words, he's saying America is falling apart, and we're watching it, and look what's happening. It's a form of art to create power while the enemy invades. And while there is no classic and organized military power. Look, this is the art of Quds Force. That's what he commands, of course. Perhaps it has not been declared so far. This is the art of defeating America's policies, strategy, and power. So he's coming out right. You see what he's saying? He's come out and saying this. We're doing this. It's a show to make the Americans afraid and think that they can't do anything. And there's a whole group of people in Washington that are buying it. So he gave this thing, and he says, listen, we're just a month or two away, and the Zionist entity, their vulnerabilities will be exposed. Now, whether they have something or not, I don't know. I'm just telling you the rhetoric that they're engaged in. And part of this, because it was Yom Yerushalayim in Israel this week, and it's the end of Ramadan, they're trying to stoke this thing up. So he did that on Monday or Tuesday. On Tuesday, in advance of Khamenei giving a speech about Israel and Iran, they released this video. In a pre-Khamenei talk, Iran State TV aired this clip depicting an IRGC attack on Congress. And here's exactly what the video looks like. So you see, they blew up the Capitol in Washington. This is what Iran is doing. This comes from Iranian Twitter accounts. So Khamenei, he also came out on May 7th, on Friday, and said, I tell you with confidence, the downward movement of the Zionist regime has started and it will not stop. And you can go to his English language website and you can look at the full text of his speech. And he also, in there, he gave like 10 examples of things that are going to happen. The issue of Palestine continues to be the most important active issue for the Islamic Ummah collectively, the Islam around the world. I tell you with confidence, these attempts will not get them anywhere. The downward movement of the Zionist enemy has started and will not stop moving downward. The failed project called the deal of the century, and it's upside down because he did that, or whoever runs his Twitter and Facebook and website. And the effort to normalize the relationships between a few weak Arab governments and the Zionist regime were desperate attempts to run away from the nightmare. I tell you with confidence, these attempts will not get them anywhere. Cooperation between Muslims around the pivot of Holy Quds, that's Jerusalem, and it is an absolute nightmare for the Zionists and for their American and European advocates. There are two determining factors in the future. First and foremost is the continued activities of resistance in the Palestinian lands and the strengthening of the line of jihad and martyrdom. And second, global support on the part of governments and Muslim nations throughout the world for the Palestinian mujahideen. So, mujahidis, or whatever they're called. Mujahidis, thank you. And this is a cartoon he used. All Palestinians, including the ones in Gaza, in Quds, in the West Bank, in the 1948 lands, and even ones living in refugee camps, form a single unit, and they should adopt a strategy of coordination. Every part should defend another part and under pressure, and they should utilize the tools at their disposals. And then they show Israeli soldiers crying at a funeral of one of their compatriots. Today, hope of achieving victory is stronger than ever. The balance is swung in favor of the Palestinians. The Zionist enemy has become weaker year after year. Israel is not a country, rather is a terrorist camp against the Palestinian nation and other Muslim nations. Fighting against this despotic regime is fighting against oppression and terrorism, and this is a collective responsibility. In this auspicious future, cooperation between Muslim countries should be a main and fundamental goal, because the pivot around which cooperation turns is the issue of Palestine, the entirety of that country, and the fate of Holy Quds. And then he says Christians should go along with this. So what happened then was later, Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, came out. They actually had, by the way, a cartoon contest about, it was called the Palestine is Not Alone International Cartoon, Caricature, and Poster Contest. And this is the one that won. So you see the Jewish soldier there, you can figure it out. The German intelligence, they came out with a report on Iran, and that this is still a problem. Iran is a problem. They're trying to get weapons. They are funding all these terrorist organizations. This is Germany. This is the report just released recently. They're proliferating in the area of nuclear weapons. And then Nasrallah gave a speech. And one of the things he said so here's what he said. I'll just summarize. You can find this online. There are multiple copies of it. But essentially he says, listen, Israel is very weak. How do I know that they're weak? They have a military operation. They have a training exercise coming up that's going to last for like a month. If they were so strong, they wouldn't need to have a military exercise. You see how they twist things? Israel does training to be the best, but this guy takes it and turns around and says, look how weak they are. They have to practice. That just means we're going to be able to defeat them very, very quickly. And apparently, since he appears to be not only the head of Hezbollah, but the minister of truth in that part of the world, he says they're weak. And he says, we're also this demarcation lines where we're fighting in the Mediterranean over where the boundaries are going to be, so who can drill for gas. And that little wedge there between the Israel boundary line and the Lebanon boundary line, the Lebanon says, we get the green one. Israel says, no, we get the blue one. And Israel's kind of come back and said, no, we get the red one. So they're negotiating. And they're not going anywhere, but there's no drilling going on out there because nobody's going to invest, because they don't want to invest and then have the other country come in and say, well, that's all of our stuff. See ya. Thanks, by the way, thanks for setting everything up. And this is hurting Lebanon economically. It's not really affecting Israel all that much. So he just says, and then he goes on to say, International Jerusalem Day coincides with the stability of the axis of resistance on all its fronts. So he's saying, listen, this Jerusalem Day thing, this is a big deal. We've got to resist this. We've got to show resistance. The same day, this comes from Memory TV. They do a lot of good work. And I tried to find the original of this video, but I could not. So I don't usually borrow from Memory TV, but go to memory.org and contribute to them because they do good work and they need support. But this is Israel to be Crushed. This was a music video that was released by Al Gadar Group. And so what you're going to see, I have the audio turned off, but this is the music video. We have come to annihilate you. We have come to annihilate you. And you see the imagery in the background. You see the boats that they have. We're going to throw you into the sea. And you see the Jewish hat, the Orthodox Jewish hat there, and you'll see Jerusalem in the background. And we're coming to get you. We're coming to get rid of you. This is mainstream stuff, at least from this group. Israel is to be crushed. And then you'll see what they're going to say is you're going to see a picture of sort of a map. Here's the generals lining up. It's a map of Israel. And then it's going to say, we're going to launch missiles. And your nights are numbered. We are people of great courage, and our aim is lethal. Since Khaybar, our attacks have been unparalleled. It is true that we say that you are fading out. Israel is to be crushed. Israel is to be crushed. And you see the missiles launch, and you'll see what happens here. This is what they are saying. This is what they plan. This is what they want to do. Now, here comes the countdown clock. You are the most malignant, cancerous glands. What do you do with cancer? You cut it out. You get rid of it. And there you see the explosions. Israel supposedly is destroyed. So this is a music video in Iran. Now look, this is something to be concerned about though, because Iran has developed a lot of capabilities. But the fact that sanctions were put on them meant that they had to they couldn't outsource things anymore. They had to develop it in-house. And they're very bright people, and they're committed religiously, so they've developed a lot of drones and everything. And this is General McKenzie. He's the head of CENTCOM, testifying before a Senate Armed Services Committee a little over a week ago. What he says about the state of America relative to Iran. This is troubling.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, distinguished members of the House Armed Services Committee. I'd now like to briefly summarize challenges in the region. While Iran has itself avoided state-on-state attacks on U.S. forces since last January strikes on the Al Assad and Erbil air bases, it continues to menace regional partners and the free flow of commerce through the use of proxies and the proliferation of armed, unmanned aerial systems and other munitions. Its pursuit of regional hegemony remains the greatest source of instability across the Middle East. The CENTCOM area of responsibility is the most cyber-contested theater in the world. It is also the proving ground for the proliferation and employment of unmanned weaponized systems, many emanating from Iran. With that, I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Desjardins is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Smith. General McKenzie, you'd mentioned in your opening statement that as a result of the challenges faced with UAS detection and interdiction, the United States is for the first time since the Korean War operating without complete air superiority. What should we be doing to address this gap in our capabilities and retain the advantage against Iranian forces?
So I think first of all, the Department of Defense has moved up very aggressively to address this problem. The Army is the executive agent for close-in protection against these small UAS systems that are most concerning to me. Sometimes it is very difficult for us to detect them until it's too late. We are not there yet, and it remains a very concerning priority of mine.
Have air superiority for the first time, total air superiority. That's a troubling thing. This is also released by the U.S. Fifth Fleet today in the Arabian Sea. They This is a U.S. Carrier, and on the carrier deck, as they've laid out the arms that they seized, mostly Chinese-made, on their way to the Houthis in Iran. Here's a larger picture. That's what they found today in the Arabian Sea on its way to Yemen, to the Houthis. Here's another picture of it from the other angle. And Iran is doing this. Iran is funding this thing. Look at the Arabian Sea shipping lanes. It's a very active area. It's easy, even a big ship is easy to hide. Jonathan Spire has a great article. I don't have time to go into this because there's something I want to do. I'll just have to share this midweek. Listen, Seth Franzman has a couple great articles at Jerusalem Post. Jonathan Spire has a great article at the Jerusalem Post on Friday about Turkey and Iran and how they're kind of unified in some ways and they're a problem. Jonathan also has a great article at the Australian. It's behind a paywall, but if you go to his Facebook page, he published the article in the comments under his post about the article in the Australian. I'll just summarize what he said. He lives in Jerusalem. I went down to, it's Ramadan, so the Muslims fast during the day, and I went to a Palestinian food shop, bakery, whatever, and I got a pastry. And I said something to the Palestinian, the Arab guy that was waiting on me, and I said, it must be hard to sell this stuff during Ramadan when you can't eat till the evening. And he said the response was very unusual. There was overt hostility. And he said it again because he thought the guy didn't understand him, and it didn't get any better. And then another Palestinian in the shop sort of intervened. But he said, listen, the city is very, very tense. Even Caroline Glick in her article in Israel Hayom on Friday, let me see if I can find this very quickly here. It's called A Powder Keg, Courtesy of Washington. And in the article, she says something, I think this is very telling. I would go to her website and read her articles. I don't have time to read them to you. But she says, the reality obscured by the Democrats' media echo chambers that Biden's domestic policies have launched American society into a downward spiral driven by hatred and fear. His foreign politics have placed Israel in the eye of a storm of epic proportions. Now, Caroline Glick is not prone to hyperbole. I find her to be a very truthful author. With its members now grasping the reins of power, Israel's ruling class must face the truth of the situation. Excellent article, Israel Hayom, but you can get the article in English on her Facebook page. But look, this is what happened. Palestinian Media Watch says this is the Fatah put people up to this. And here is some pictures from what happened at the Temple Mount on Friday. It was not pretty. There were stun grenades, there were rocks thrown, there were bottles thrown. Of course, President Erdogan came out and said, we strongly condemn Israel's heinous attacks against our first Qibla, Al-Aqsa Mosque. Historically, that's not even true, and he knows it. Well, if he doesn't know it, he needs to be told the truth, that are unfortunately being carried out every Ramadan. As Turkey, we will continue to stand by our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Because that was they just went there to pray, right? So this is a picture I found on a Twitter feed taken Friday at the Temple Mount. And there are no Jews up there, okay? This is what you see. What do you see there in that box? Rocks and stones. You go to the Fatah Facebook page and you'll find that they were pushing this. And you see this thing, we're going to, this is what we need to do. We need to fight this. Now, I'm going to play, this is an attack against Al-Aqsa Mosque by Palestinians. Yeah, so Erdogan says this, somebody responds with the truth. In the left-hand corner of the video, watch what happens. This is Muslims on the Temple Mount throwing things towards Israeli soldiers. This is not, okay, well, you can see what happens. Do you understand where the fire's coming from? It's coming from within their holy place. Let's see. Okay, this is Israel's article. A powder keg courtesy of Washington. I have a real heart for the Jewish people. I've skipped about 50 slides this morning just because it is Mother's Day, and you're not going to beat the Baptists today anyway. That's for sure. Or the Methodists even, you know. But the restaurant should be pretty clear open by the time you get there. A few years ago at Fellowship Bible Chapel, we had an evening where we had Jeremy Gimpel from the Land of Israel group come and speak to us. Now, Jeremy is Jewish, Orthodox Jewish. I don't agree with everything that he says, but I noticed on his YouTube thing this morning, and I had time to spend one-on-one with Jeremy. He is a wonderful person. He has a wonderful wife. But, you know, look, we made it clear that we differ on the issue of salvation. That was pretty clear from that evening. Steve Mitchell did a great job handling that. I don't know if it's still on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel, but I like Jeremy. I love the Jewish people, and I want this Jewish people to be saved. And I found his comments about the tragedy at Mount Meron, where the Orthodox Jews were there at a tomb. It's probably the second holiest site in Israel or that's visited, second most visited site in Israel, next to the Western Wall, the Kotel, in terms of Jews going there. And it's mostly Orthodox Jews, and sometimes what we would call the ultra-Orthodox. And listen, they can be very arrogant, okay? They need Jesus, just like everybody needs Jesus. But we live at this very interesting time of prophetic history. And I was sort of struck about the convergence of things in Jeremy's video. I want you to listen to what he says. He was born in America. I think his wife is from Cleveland. Just think of it in terms of what we know that's coming in Bible prophecy. And here's what he says. About 3 minutes. Whoops.
You know, Judaism wasn't originally a religion of reciting words in a prayer book. That was not the original Jewish spiritual experience. Rabbinic Judaism, as it's practiced today, saved the Jewish people during the exile. But Rabbinic Judaism was trying to hold on to a spirit, to a reality that could only be experienced in the land of Israel, that could only be experienced in the temple in Jerusalem. That temple experience was the core of prophetic Judaism, biblical Judaism. And when the Romans came, they destroyed our entire ancient world, but they couldn't destroy our dream to return home. That desire to worship God like days of old still burns in the Jewish soul. It's like that yearning never died in our hearts. That was, I mean, if you think about it, what was the temple experience like? It was a mass gathering of hundreds of thousands of people. There was fire, there was music, song, dancing, ecstasy, togetherness. There was an energy of love, hope, unity, prayer, a spiritual energy that can only be generated by thousands and thousands of people coming together with one purpose, with one heart. Sounds too good to be true. Perhaps in the Western world, such a gathering might be too good to be true. But in Israel, it's a reality you can experience every Lag BaOmer in Meron. You can actually feel the emergence of temple Judaism again. And I want you to see this clip. It's just for a few moments, but it's a video that was taken a few minutes right before the disaster in Meron this year. Look at what it looked like. Thousands and thousands of people singing and praying for Mashiach to come. I mean, there's just nothing like that any other place or any other time in Israel.
Shalom, my name is Jeremy Gimpel. A few months ago, we started an online seminar teaching life-changing biblical wisdom revealed from the original Hebrew and straight from the mountains of Judea. With global instability on the rise, more and more people are turning to God, realizing now they don't exactly know where to look for guidance. We're participating in fulfilling prophecy as we learn the Bible through the eyes of prophecy, with a focus on what it's telling about us in our lives today. What you will discover is that the wisdom transmitted thousands of years ago is speaking directly to us in our time right now. Instead of learning the Bible as a religion, it's the Torah of Israel, the living guidance of God.
What do we do with that? Do you understand where we are on God's prophetic calendar? Do you really understand? Now listen, we know that there's trouble coming. And it's our responsibility, whether it's accepted or not, to point people to the true Messiah of Israel, who we know as Yeshua. Look, Jeremy's heard the gospel. Pray for his salvation. I don't think he would be super offended if I said that, even into his face. Wonderful guy, wonderful man. But like all of us, everybody needs Jesus. And I'm just saying, as there is an awakening there among the people in the land, there are some ministries that will rail against these people and write them off as some kind of vermin. You know who those ministries are. What I see is a people who are awakening to the Messiah. And we've got to point them to the real one. When we were there in 1995, there was a giant yellow sign. If you turned your back to the Western Wall and looked towards the newly built, because it was destroyed in some of the wars, the Jewish quarter of the old city. It's probably only a quarter of a century old. I mean, it looks very new compared to the rest of the old city, obviously. And there was a sign there, and excuse my Hebrew, Hakuna Laviat HaMashiach, prepare for the coming of Messiah. That's what we need to be about. You know, it's controversial in prophetic circles. I'm going to give you my view. I think Mike Clapham would be on board with me here, Steve Mitchell as well. There's a passage in Matthew. It says, "In this gospel, the kingdom shall be preached in all the world." You know that passage? Now, a lot of people say, well, that's a whole different gospel. Listen, folks, it's part of the same gospel in my view. In Ephesians chapter 6, Paul says, you are to go forth with your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. When you unpack that, what Paul said was go forth with the message of the kingdom that's coming. We now live at a time where we've got to prepare people for that in the context of the whole gospel of salvation by grace through faith. The gospel of the kingdom, I believe, particularly as we get closer, is more important than ever to declare that. That's my view. You can call me a heretic if you're not. I want to see people get saved. I'm not going to write off people. I don't get to do that. That's God's decision as to who gets saved. My obligation is to try to preach the truth of the Bible and the fact that Mashiach is coming. Let's pray. Lord, we pray that you will bless us this week, give us opportunities in all of our communities and among people of Israel to share the true gospel of the coming King. In Jesus' name, amen.